Beyond the Valley.
Microsoft had already cut 6,000 jobs in May, so when the US tech company announced that it was planning to lay off a further 9,000 workers, many claimed that this was the result of AI replacing our jobs. But it was argued that not only did this have nothing to do with AI, but that artificial intelligence is a long way off from replacing us in the workplace. So, what's the truth? Is AI already hitting the job market? And if not, when and whose jobs will be the first to go? Hello and welcome to Beyond the Valley. I'm Arjun, and I'm so excited to introduce my new co-host, Steve Kovach. Steve, welcome to Beyond the Valley.
Hey there, Arjun. It's good to be working with you, and I'm really excited. I'm CNBC's tech correspondent over here in the United States. I'm based in New York City, so I'm glad we're bringing a global element to Beyond the Valley. I'm really excited to join you.
Steve, you've been covering tech for a long time. Just give us a quick backgrounder on you.
Yeah, so I've been CNBC here. I just hit my 7-year mark, believe it or not. And
congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, and I've been covering tech pretty much my entire professional career. Specifically here at CNBC, I focus on Apple, a little company maybe you've heard of, and Microsoft is my other big beat company. And then I also kind of dabble in some other things. When I was kind of putting together my thesis for my coverage here on CNBC, I thought, video games, people don't realize how big video games are and what a big business that is. So I added gaming to my beat element too. So I cover, companies like Take-Two Interactive and the Xbox division over at Microsoft and all those cool companies doing interesting things in entertainment as well.
I feel like, any of our current listeners and any new listeners we pick up on along the way, they're going to hear a lot about gaming. You and I both love our bits of gaming. So
I already have a Nintendo Switch 2 at home. That's my weekend plan.
There you go.
Yeah.
I just opened a new game yesterday, so we're on the right path.
Just two grown men talking about toys. It's going to be great.
and look, Steve, we're going to be talking about AI today. And I think, that Chat GPT moment we had a couple of years back now was such a big moment. You cover, like you said, Apple, Microsoft, so many of these big companies as well. What's your sense at the moment of kind of what the big themes are amongst the big tech giants when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I've been kind of toying around with this because I focus so much on Apple and they aren't exactly at the forefront of AI. But what I've been kind of thinking a lot about, Arjun, is like this build versus partner or build on top of. So, and this is kind of emerging out of Apple. Obviously, we saw this year they were going to put out that new super version of Siri. It was going to be personal. It's going to use the data on your iPhone. It's going to be ChatGPT, but with an Apple twist, right? And that was what everyone got excited about. And they failed to deliver on it. And it was the first time, probably the worst time I've seen Apple go through as far as promising a major product and then failing to deliver. You can argue things like the power charger thing or little things like that. But as far as something coming out and saying, we're going to take part in this AI revolution and then failing to do it. And then now we hear these reports, Arjun, that they might put that to the side and partner, just like they do in search with Google. They might start partnering with OpenAI or Anthropic to kind of power the foundation of this new version of Siri and then move on from there. We're seeing that with Samsung. I was just at the Samsung event this week. We're recording this the week of July 10th, and it was so interesting to see them. They're not building their own AI. They're using Google Gemini and Perplexity, one of the hottest companies right now in the startup world. They're not building their own LLMs. They're building a layer on top of the existing thing. So I'm kind of looking at it from that perspective now and seeing as these companies are spending enormous amounts of money building all those data centers, as they're spending so much money trying to achieve artificial general intelligence and the talent wars that we're going to get into in a little bit. Where's all that money going? Who's building cool products on top of it? It's not necessarily the LLM makers right now. It's going to be, there's this idea now, it's going to be someone building on top of that. So that's the theme I've been watching.
Yeah, those are some great themes there, Steve. And we're going to dig into those in some future episodes, no doubt. But let's get into what we're talking about today on the podcast. We're talking about AI and whether the threat to the job market is real and happening right now, or maybe it has been overhyped, or maybe it's a bit of both. To help us explore all of this and more, I have a very special guest joining us today, Michal Lev-Ram, who is a contributing editor at Fortune and also a CNBC contributor as well. Michal, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. It's great to be here, and we've got quite the global footprint between the three of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got the East Coast, we've got the West Coast, and we're here in Europe. Michal, look, we introduced this podcast talking about the layoffs we saw at Microsoft. You know, the companies argued that it was nothing to do with AI. What's your view? Is it to do with what we're seeing in terms of the efficiency gains of AI, the productivity gains of AI, or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, I think my sense is that it absolutely has to do with AI, but not in the way that everybody thinks or is scared of. I think that what we're seeing is not engineers or other workers losing their jobs as a direct consequence of AI overtaking jobs. I think we're pretty far from that at this point. I personally don't know a single software engineer who has lost their job to AI, been replaced by AI quite yet. Not saying it won't happen in the future, but what I do think is going on, and the reason it is directly related to AI, is that companies like Microsoft, obviously, we will see others as well, are sort of restructuring, reprioritizing, reorganizing, which, is a nice way to say laying people off ultimately in order to meet the demands of this new era of this technological transformation. So it is related. It is indirectly a cause of AI, but I don't think we're seeing people losing jobs because AI agents are taking them over.
Michal, I don't know if you caught yesterday. Again, we recorded this on July 10th, so for people who want to go back and look, Bloomberg had an interesting story yesterday talking kind of the fallout from those layoffs that we heard about last week. And one of them was the executives telling staff, we've been able to save $500 million through like AI, productivity benefits or what have you. And, more talk about how much code is being written by AI at Microsoft. I look at this with a much more cynical or skeptical view probably than a lot of people. My first question is, how do they even quantify that? I mean, I talk to so many CTOs about using, adopting these tools, and they have a hard time, quantifying this kind of stuff. What was your take on that when you heard that $500 million number, which, by the way, is nothing to Microsoft?
True. Drop in the bucket. Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, I definitely hear from people out here in the Valley who are absolutely vibe coding. Like, I think that movement, that trend is real. But, to what point? And also, what's all of the other work that's involved? And so a CEO can get out there, a tech CEO, and say, these are our savings, or 20 to 30% of our lines of code are now being written by AI. But then what's all of the other work that's involved? And, you've got to test it. You've got to check it. There's so much other, there are other aspects of the job of an engineer. And so how good is it at what it's doing? I don't think we're measuring that. And I agree with you. I think measuring just in general, the savings part, the dollars part especially is tricky, because maybe it's writing all this code, but then it's requiring more tests after the fact, right? I don't think that we're clear on exactly what the numbers are telling us and what the numbers are quite yet. But again, I do think that it's happening. I mean, I do hear, from people that they're doing it. They're vibe coding, So I think we're very early though.
I've not talked to a single programmer or coder who says they don't use an LLM of some sort to help them out. What do you think about entry-level jobs, though? Because I was talking to a colleague of mine here, and his son is a computer science major going into this world soon to graduate. And there's this kind of idea that his level of entry-level computer engineers are kind of it's tougher to get those jobs. Have you been hearing that out there? Not
quite yet. I mean, honestly, what I hear more of is still concern. Maybe this is a surprise, but still concerns of losing jobs to offshoring. That's much more prevalent. And I do think that's much more prevalent among entry-level jobs, right? But again, where things are going, the trajectory, yes, I'd be very concerned. We've got Meta poaching people for hundreds of millions of dollars, which I know we'll get to. But then on the other end of the spectrum, like, those people had to start somewhere. Right. Maybe not their PhDs; they came out of school with these accolades. But a lot of other people do have to start somewhere. So how do you get ahead? Because we're seeing this huge market, huge demand for top talent. But top talent has to start somewhere. So I do think that that's a risk, and that's something that, pipeline-wise, companies are really going to have to think through, because how do you cultivate that talent that you're going to need at some point?
Michal, just before we get into that talent conversation, because it's a fascinating one, are there areas at the moment you are seeing more disruption to the job market in as a result of AI than others? And by the way, vibe coding is probably one of the best jargony words to come out of tech in a while. It's quite fun. But yeah, no, are there other areas you're seeing? Because I know there's a lot of talk about, customer services and call centers and these kind of areas. But yeah, just give us a sense of what you're seeing.
Yeah, I haven't seen numbers on impact to customer service. I definitely think that that's going to be a big one that's impacted, and we've seen that kind of play out over time. It's not an entirely new phenomenon, of course, and again, with that one, there was a lot of offshoring, and I think that there still is, obviously, but at this point, yes, there's risk to those offshore jobs by American companies and other companies. Losing jobs to AI. I think that in a lot of areas, probably the real risk longer term is, have we reached kind of peak employment? And that's a really interesting trend in my view. I just think it's a bit early to see. There are certain jobs where it makes sense, absolutely, that we'll see more real losses. But the real shift that I want to be watching is, it used to be the fact that, especially among tech companies, but other companies as well, when they grew their business, they grew their workforce. And I wonder if the 2021, 2022, crazy boom that we saw in hiring as these businesses had to expand because of demand, which was great for them, if that was a peak and we'll never get back to it.
Can I just clarify, peak employment you're talking about in the tech industry? So
yes,
max employment. Wow. Yeah, that's such a fascinating idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers over time, and employment includes their, some of them, of course, outsource this, but it's across the board, right? It is customer service. It's all sorts of areas. It's not just engineers. If you look at the trends, over the decades, for some of the bigger tech companies, every time the business grew, every time there were these inflection points, the workforce grew. They needed more people, right? And then there are, these little tiny dips where there have been layoffs when, the economy's bad, whatever is going on, right? Or they're restructuring. But ultimately, it's been this crazy, crazy growth curve over the years. And in 2021, 2022, for some companies, we saw a significant peak. We saw it grow significantly, and then it's dipped off a bit since. And I guess my question is, was that kind of the last big, huge growth curve? Because if what some of these CEOs are saying is true, maybe for future growth, including what we're seeing now, yeah, they need to add AI talent, but I don't know if they need to add in the same kind of numbers that we've seen in the past. That's all.
I don't know if either of you two have interacted with an AI chatbot customer service thing, but it is a nightmare. Remember those old phone trees? You call a customer service line and you have to slam on the 0 button in order to get a human being to talk to you. There's no 0 button with these. It's you cannot get what you want. Long story short, I was stuck in a chatbot death loop of trying to get it to do what I want. Eventually I had to, pick up a phone and call a human being to get done what I wanted to do. I had another hotel thing do the same thing, couldn't change my reservation. So I think we're a little bit of way off. I know we're going to get into this in a second, but this is Mark Benioff's whole pitch, right? That we're going to be doing customer service via chatbots, but in my experience, it kind of stinks.
Maybe you'll pay a premium to talk to a human. I could totally see that happening. I would do it. Supposedly people are nicer when they're interacting with bots than when they're interacting with humans, though, which I think is really interesting. Yeah. It doesn't sound like you were, but... No.
I was swearing at this thing. And when they become sentient and try to kill us, I'll be the first on the mark to get it.
Yeah, probably. You're on the list, Steve. You're on the list. I regularly find myself saying, get me a human. Can you get me a human, please? Can I speak to a human?
Whatever.
They don't know what's going on.
The digital version of pressing 0 on your keypad, yeah.
Beyond the Valley.
let's move on to another key part of this conversation, and we've spoken briefly about it earlier on. It's talent, right? We're hearing all these stories about Meta offering hundreds of $1 million for talent, of top talent, to come in to work on their super intelligence. There's a big, almost talent land grab going on right now amongst big tech companies as well. How do you see this playing out? I mean, this is so intense, and I've spoken to kind of people here in Europe who are sort of seeing a similar thing as well. Big tech grabbing talent here in Europe, one, because there's a lot of it, two, because it's cheaper as well. But how do you see this kind of land grab for talent playing out, Michal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not entirely new, and we've seen. Speaking of overseas in London, like we've seen a lot of people poached from DeepMind, which is a huge hub of incredible talent. Europe's got incredible talent overall. Lots of people coming out of the universities there. What we're seeing now out here as well. In the Valley, I think is super interesting because it's a phenomenon that, and Steve, I don't know about you, I have not seen before, not in this kind of, at this scale, these kinds of figures being thrown around.
Oh my God,
so,
it's insane. No, not for regular talent. Usually they buy the company for that money, but not this, yeah.
Exactly. And so, I think first of all, just the fact that it's so unprecedented and that I've heard and seen memes about this, that the nerds are finally as hot and as in demand as sports as athletes, right? That it's open trading period, but with AI scientists. And so there's that just as a phenomenon, which is really unprecedented. But I think what's also interesting about what's going on, it's clear what the motivation is. A company like Meta especially is trying to figure out what its strategy is and trying to compete here. I think that part is obvious. But the other aspect here is that they're not just getting talent in-house in a way that, they see as an open avenue for them, but they're also at the same time, I think, denting their competitors, right? They're damaging their competitors. And that's also super fascinating as a strategy, as a tactic. And it's quite ruthless, but I think we're going to see more and more of that happening. It's just incredible to watch.
Is your impression, so we have our CNBC events team, we hold these dinners with tech executives, and it's Chatham House rules, so I'm not allowed to say who said this, but it was an executive who said this in the know in Silicon Valley, et cetera. And he's a quantum guy and said, when you look at quantum talent, there are only a few hundred people in the world who are really capable of doing this kind of stuff. When you move into AI, it gets bigger, but it's only 8,000. And these top talent it's literally the people capable of building this stuff and working on this stuff and who have researched this stuff. Mm-hmm. Is that your impression as well, that there might, just the reason these enormous, we hear these stories just this week that, Meta poached an Apple exec and for a package worth $200 million. That's insane. Usually you buy a company, not a person for that. So is it just a dearth of talent that's causing these prices to go up?
I absolutely think so. I also think that, to your point, usually you buy a company for that amount of money because the AI valuations have been so insane and so hot and so over the top. You can't go and buy, you can't easily, I should say, not very many companies can go out there and buy an OpenAI or an Anthropic or whatever, right? And so what you can do is spend, several $100 million and get this top talent to come, walk through your door happily. I was really surprised about the Apple poaching. I think that's probably I don't think we're going to see a lot of people being poached from Apple because
they have no one.
Exactly. I think it should be the other way around, but we'll see what Apple ends up doing here. But yeah, there was a LinkedIn survey from just a little while back that was looking at, and granted it's using LinkedIn data, and so it's what people are putting on their profiles, but they basically looked at where are the top concentrations of AI talent. And the top concentration was in Israel, actually. And then Singapore, and then it was kind of smattering across Europe, different European countries. That said, these are really small numbers still. And so I do think that, the concentration, I think for Israel was like 1.98% of workers in the workforce, something like that. It was under 2% have, AI skills. I do think the concentration of really high level, AI scientists, PhD level, the kind of people you really need in your door, is still quite small, and it takes time to build up that kind of talent. But there are also, there are other jobs across companies where AI is a part of it. And, of course, we all know that at this point, it's like the most important thing you should do, whatever job you're going for, is to be AI fluent and all of that. So I think also the way that we look at AI skills is probably going to change, and it's very different if you look at different parts of the spectrum in a corporation, right?
Right.
But for the top talent, yes, there is. We wouldn't see these kind of numbers if there were a lot of people.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Supply and demand of the talent. Well, it's a good thing here in America, Arjun. The kids are more focused on becoming influencers on TikTok as opposed to AI PhDs or whatever. So
we got the same problem.
We got that going for us.
Same problem,
which is whereas in China, they're learning all this stuff at age 4 or whatever. So
yeah, absolutely. China has been pretty. I think there was a report maybe last year or so. Some of the schools in Beijing were adding sort of these AI courses into kind of lower school classes. So China's very focused on this, of course, necessarily because also the amount of restrictions there are on China in terms of access to technology, etc. They want that next generation to be able to come up with innovations that can put them back on the map when it comes to some of these foundational technologies. There's loads of restrictions on chips, and that's hampering perhaps some of the development that is possible out in China. And so they're laser focused on all of these, and they play a long game in China. We know that. They're a very long game. They think long term. What I wanted to also maybe give the European perspective a little bit as well, because Michal, you mentioned London as well, and some of these companies like DeepMind, of course, owned by Google. What we're seeing a lot of here in Europe, in the UK, and elsewhere on the continent is a lot of these people who were working at either companies like DeepMind or other large US tech companies in particular, they're leaving and are beginning to start up their own AI stuff here. And there's been some success stories. You think of, there's a foundational model company in France called Mistral. They were also like former DeepMind execs, etc. There's H Company, which raised a massive seed round last year. So you are starting to see a lot of that happening here in Europe. A lot of these European founders are coming from US big tech, which I think is a really interesting dynamic because Europe, lost out on the last internet age, more or less. There were no major European players, and there's this real kind of fervor here in Europe that actually we need European champions, we need a European equivalent to OpenAI, we need the infrastructure players. So that's a big one, I think, just naturally these people coming out of these companies, but two, there is kind of this political will to some extent in certain countries like France, for example. Is that, in terms of the big companies, the new startups coming out in the US, is that a similar kind of thing? They're coming out from these established players and trying to set up their own stuff?
I think we're starting to see that. I think we'll see a lot more of that. Anthropic is an example, right? We've certainly seen quite an exodus from OpenAI in particular, and so with Mira Murati and others going out and creating their own AI companies. I don't think that all of them are trying to create the kind of foundational models, from scratch. There's all sorts of, other products that and layers to AI that people are looking at. But yeah, absolutely. And by the way, one of the interesting phenomenons, and I don't know how big this will get. I don't know what you guys think, but Sam Altman's whole vision for we're going to see one person billion-dollar companies in the future because they're aided by AI, because you can grow a company to be quite, successful, big, whatever.
Doesn't he have a bet going on with his friends, when that's going to happen or something? Didn't he say that, when the first unicorn single human being company happens?
I wonder how much money they're putting on this. I don't even want to know.
Right.
If they're betting on it, that's hilarious. But so we have not seen $1 billion company created, but there was just recently an acquisition of an Israeli company, Base 44, which is basically a solo shop sold for $80 million to another company after just 6 months, and it's basically it's a vibe coding company, and it's basically like one dude. And so I think that I don't think that works for all kinds of products. You don't build the next Microsoft with one person. That's even if we've reached peak employment, that's never going to happen. But for some products, it might be an option. And so that's also going to be interesting if we have people leave existing AI companies and go on to just, hey, I'm going to just grow this, sell it, see what happens, and not hire a whole mess of people.
You also got to be aware too of like the charlatans out there, and this is like prime environment for such a thing where it's very easy to raise money. You mentioned Mira Murati, the former CTO of OpenAI. She raised what, $1.5 billion at a $10 billion valuation, something like that. No product, no team. Like literally nothing other than she used to work at OpenAI and be the CTO. And then I'm totally blanking. This was a European company, Arjun. I'm totally blanking on their name, but they were like a no-code AI company, and they just went belly up. I'm completely blanking on that startup's name, but this just happened a couple days ago. But there are a number of examples. We saw this in Web 2.0 in the mobile era. Lofty promises and under delivering too. So I guess my question, because we hear Mark Zuckerberg hiring all these people, how much they're paying, and so forth, and then Mark Zuckerberg comes out and announces this super intelligence group, and they're going to do something. What is that something? Like, what do you have any sense of what? It's just like we're going to build AGI, okay, and then what? Like, what does that mean? Like, there's no product there. So what do you think the product is?
You know what? I'm with you. It is not clear to me what, other than the need to jump on the bandwagon and be a part of this new technological transformation, what the real strategy is. We've seen Meta acquire their way to growth, right? And this is a different iteration of that. Like we said, it's not acquiring a company, but it's acquiring talent. I have no idea. I mean, I know he likes to talk about AI friends. I don't think that's a business strategy. It's very fraught for a number of reasons, including like, what does it say about humanity if that's the direction we're going? But I just don't know what the appetite for it and the business model is. So, that said, like, don't count them out. They've managed to sort of acquire their way to growth. And so maybe they go down this route of building out their own technology, their own platforms. Maybe it's a platform play and developers figure out something creative to do with it. Or maybe they realize down the road, you know what, we actually need to acquire X company that's like, right. I don't mean X, but I mean just a company. That's, maybe it could be X. I
don't think they want to buy X.
Actually got a product. No, I don't, not yes.
After Grok turned
that's a different topic.
After Grok turned into what it called itself Mecha Hitler, I think that's out of the conversation.
Agreed.
Beyond the Valley.
Steve, when we were planning for this episode, you were bringing out some interesting examples as we were just throwing some thoughts around executives, right? And what they've been saying about how they see AI impacting jobs or the kind of jobs they can do. And we were discussing kind of how a few years ago, it wasn't really cool to come out and say, hey, AI can do all of this. It was always, no, AI is coming, but you're always going to have a human in the loop and AI is going to help you. And it was this very kind of utopian narrative around how we would work with these wonderful AI systems. But that's changed, right?
Yeah, and actually, this is why I wanted Michal to come on this podcast with this episode with us, because she and I discussed this very thing on Squawk Box a couple of days ago last week. And it's so fascinating here just to hear the change in tone. The Journal did a really good story, even among non-tech CEOs. And, my cynical view again here is you're going to see even just non-tech companies. They use Ford as an example in that Wall Street Journal story, using this as an excuse just to trim the fat from middle management because they overhired. And so many of these companies, Intel is another one, where if you're a middle manager, like a VP level type of person, your KPI or a key performance indicator for your bosses, of whether you get a bonus or a raise or whatever, is how many people have you hired underneath you? And that becomes like a whole thing, and the organizations get bloated. And we went through this coming out of the pandemic, and they didn't need to use AI as an excuse. And those Microsoft layoffs we started the show talking about, that those were mostly getting rid of the middle manager types, and this idea like we have become too bloated. And I can see this happening at so many other companies, these kind of MBA brained executives who, they need to cut costs, and they see what's going on with the tariff picture and the uncertainty ahead in the economy here in the United States. And they need to inoculate themselves from that. And if AI is the excuse, fine. But now they're being rewarded for it because AI is the hot thing. And it's okay to say that now. We're doing this because of AI, even if you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we've seen this movie play out before. I think that that's absolutely part of what's going on, and especially some of the non-tech companies, where this is kind of the latest like crutch to lean on, where you're explaining your layoffs and you're trimming the fat. And we see this happen, every once in a while. Companies that are doing well also, by the way. I mean, you cannot argue with Microsoft's numbers. This isn't an example of a company that's struggling and like, oh, we need to cut costs. This is an opportunity to cut costs. But I do think that with some of the companies, Microsoft included, it's a reprioritization, right? And if you look at Meta, if they're spending these hundreds of millions of dollars on this top talent, well, I think probably down the road, like either you don't spend as much on other talent or you cut, just strategically. So it's a reallocation. I'm using these words. I know I feel sick because these companies use these words, and it just means layoffs. We're cutting people, but there is this big technological transformation happening. So I think it makes sense, and it's not because we can have AI do all these jobs. We're not there. It's because we need to prioritize and reorient around AI. And so if you're like, there are some cuts in Europe, people who are working on Candy Crush, like, okay, it's probably time to cut a few people there. That's not the cash cow. Sorry if you guys are big Candy Crush fans. I don't know.
I play only free Candy Crush. I've made it to like level like 500
You're the
something.
problem.
Yeah, 500 something without spending a nickel on it. So I'm proud of myself for that.
That's brilliant. The other part of the equation here, I was at a tech conference in Paris, an AI conference in Paris this week, and one conversation I had with a founder, he said, I think large swathes of organization are going to be fully automated in 3 years. And a large part, of course, of these kind of very bullish predictions are this idea that the tech industry keep talking about, this agentic AI agents, these AIs with the ability to kind of carry out tasks on our behalf and things like that. And you were speaking earlier about this idea of the kind of one-person company, again, that appears to be predicated on this technology developing to that kind of capability and scale as well. Are these AI agents the future in your view, Michal? Are we going to be working for or with some of these agents?
I think there's going to be a lot of resistance to working for AI agents. I know I've read like these quirky little stories here and there of like your AI boss. I think there are probably going to be some really experimental, startups just kind of playing around with this kind of stuff. But I do not think that this is going to, I don't know about you guys. I think there's going to be massive resistance to it. And there's a company out here that does kind of AI, based HR software, using a lot of AI to automate and kind of optimize, some basic HR functions. And they released a product that basically provided like HR onboarding processes for AI agents. And just I know it's ridiculous. It's really funny. I mean, it's very forward thinking, but there was so much backlash just to that. Like, we are not ready for this.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll be working alongside AI. We'll be utilizing it in more and more jobs, including us, in the future. But I personally do not think we're going to be working for AI. I think people don't want that.
Yeah, and Michal, I know you bring this up because we talked about this on Squawk Box last week, and I was talking to. It just so happens I was visiting my sister down in Texas, and one of her neighbors works in HR for a major tech company. I shouldn't say because we were talking just like over beers, but he was telling me, at this major tech company that works on LLMs and is building this technology and all this kind of stuff, they're talking in his role as an HR person, how do they train their workforce for a future when what you said, what we hope doesn't happen, happens? An AI agent is your boss and feeding you what your performance review is and making sure you hit your numbers if you're in sales or what have you, what that looks like. And I panicked. I was just like, I can't believe you guys are already talking about that.
I'm shocked. I'm really I'm going to file that under, it's not really going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they're just preparing, like, what if this happens? What do we do?
Yeah.
But yeah, they might not know.
I mean, the whole thing here is like, we're supposed to be in control, right? And so if employees don't want this, I don't think it's going to happen. And I just can't see a world, again, anytime soon, I guess, where this is something that employees feel comfortable with. That's my sense.
Michal, we covered so much ground. Thank you for joining us on this episode. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I love all the global insights, and just please don't put an AI bot over me, okay? I don't want to be reviewed by any AI agent overlord.
We'll try not to.
Thanks,
Michal,
guys.
thanks
Bye,
so
Michal.
much.
Bye.
Beyond the Valley.
So Steve, Michal was talking there. She was saying, please don't put any AI over me. I think that brings us to a very pertinent point here about our own careers and
Right.
our own jobs, right? Like this is, if I think about some of the stuff that these AI bots can do these days, it's quite advanced. I mean, I've asked some of these bots before about research, for example. Obviously thoroughly check whatever it comes out with. But, I've asked it just as experiments to bring up some research, and it does a very, very good job, some of these things. And then you've also got things like these companies that are able to create avatars of you that speak and sound like you. And I'm just thinking, is nothing sacred?
I mean, Google literally has a fake podcast bot product. Like it'll literally, you feed it the data and it'll make a podcast. It'll like do little fake laughs and jokes, and it sounds a little contrived, and it's more of an experiment. But yeah, I'm less worried about that though, to be honest. I mean, until these things have a personality and can think, I just don't think we're close to that yet. And I think, maybe I'm being a little protective of myself here. I don't think people, at least when they're watching news or reading news or the media, they want a human they feel like they can trust and talk to and understand more than that. Now, writing is a different thing. And I think you and I both are writers as well as, on air and on TV. I've been a writer most of my career, an editor most of my career before I started doing TV full time. And I can totally see AI having a bigger role in, let's just say, a company announces a thing, and it's like you're just rewriting an announcement basically. I can see AI taking a heavier role in something like that, but an AI can't go out there and meet with anonymous sources and get a scoop on what a company is doing or a politician is doing and things like that. So there are just some things that are just that are very valuable that we do as journalists that I don't think is going to be replaceable, but a good tool. I use it for research all the time. I use it more than Google.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we do is it involves humans, and it involves a sense of humanness, not to get too kind of philosophical about it. But I was thinking a lot about this, about, in a world where there is an increasing amount of AI around us, what does it mean to be human? How do we, those human connections that are so fundamental to what we do as a career, but also just life in general, surely those become more amplified almost.
Yeah, and it's also kind of on you too. Like the royal you. If you're a writer, don't use ChatGPT to help you write. Like, I mean, you should be able to do that on your own. You should be able to write an email at least to a source or something. And if you're writing a story, like I never, like as much as I use ChatGPT for research and just general as like just a Google replacement, right? I never used it to help me in a significant or in any way to write. Period. I've never said, write me a script about, Apple earnings or something. I've never done that. I have uploaded huge like S1 filings or something to it and asked for summaries. That's super helpful. But I would never ask it to just do my job for me because I feel like just the creativity goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great point to end on, Steve. I felt like we gave this first episode together a real good run.
This
that
is
was
going to
really
be
fun.
good. This is going to be good. I can't wait for the Pokemon episode. We're going to go full. We're going to do 1 hour on Pokemon. It's going to be great. Yeah.
It's going to be a whole series. We're going to do a series. It's 10 episodes, an hour each. It's going to be amazing.
When we were having Zoom calls about this and you started drinking from a Pikachu mug, I was like, here we go. We're in. Yeah, let's go.
Well, Steve, look, loved all the insight. Thank you so much. And really looking forward to what comes next. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, more to come. Thanks, Arjun.
We'll be back for another episode of Beyond the Valley. Goodbye.
Beyond the Valley.